Dr. Power.
Yeah, I'd like to call this meeting to order, June 7th, 6 o'clock for our school board meeting. And we'll begin with the flag salute. Mrs. Rivas, would you like to lead us in the flag salute? Stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the next board business will be the approval of the minutes from May 17th, 2021, a regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Are there any comments or discussion items or corrections? No. Let's take a vote. Mrs. Lundin? Aye. Mr. Favela?
Aye.
Mrs. Libas?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Now we will approve the minutes of our study session on May 26th. We'll have a motion to approve the minutes. So moved. And a second.
I'll second.
Any comments, corrections? Okay, so we'll take a vote. Mrs. Libas?
Aye.
Mr. Favela?
Aye.
Mrs. Lundin?
Aye.
And Mrs. Lieber? Aye. Okay, now we'll move on to the hearing sessions. Do we have any cards?
Yes, we do. And this is from, we'll start with Jennifer Weddle Montgomery. And it goes, I can't begin to express my profound gratitude to the teachers, administrators, and staff of Mayales and FUESD for having all our kids safely back in school in some way, shape, or form back in October and full-time by February. What started as a weird year of frustration and tears ended with such joy at being a part of a school community that led with science, that sought parent and staff input and feedback every step of the way, and made sure to balance the health and safety of our kids' bodies with that of their minds and spirits. Incredibly proud of our Fallbrook schools.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for taking the time to write that. We really appreciate you noticing all those great things that our district has done as opposed to some other districts.
And that will be it. And just wanted to note that we have 19 participants joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Favela. Thank you. So now we will have a report from the board. We'll start with Mrs. Lundin.
Well, we had some wonderful 8th grade promotion ceremonies. I was at the one we had at San Onofre, and we had 32 wonderful graduates and their families. It was terrific and great work by staff and volunteers because it came off flawlessly. And then we had 2 promotions at Potter Junior High, quite different, much larger, equally touching. It was really great. We had a portrait of an 8th grader meeting that I was also at. So good things all the way around.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your report. Mr. Favela.
Right, I also had an opportunity to participate in the Potter Junior High 8th grade promotion. My daughter promoted. So I participated as a parent in the first ceremony and then as a board member in both, but it was very, very special. Right, and can attest to how challenging the year has been. I know my daughter, a few weeks before school was ending, she was already done with things, but we helped push her through, and I'm sure a lot of students and families were going through the same thing, but we got through it, and really glad to have seen that happen in person, to be able to share this moment as we should. So it was great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mrs. Rivas?
It's been a busy couple of weeks. I was able to visit Potter and Mayales with Dr. Singh and Ms. Lopez, and was really excited to see all the improvements at Potter, and I'm excited for my son to go there next year. And then at Mayales, we learned about the Be Glad teacher training that the teachers are doing on Saturday morning, which I think is really amazing that they want to give their Saturdays to do professional development, and then they'll be able to train other teachers in the district on that same technique, which is just a great thing for next year. I was able to attend the teacher colloquium, which was always really neat. And it was very different this year, but I think it was actually better. I got to really see, that's usually where they have the boards set up here, right? And this one, it obviously was virtual. So we were in small breakout rooms and got to hear each one of the people in our breakout room talk about their research and their data and their feedback and how they had grown from their feedback. And it was really nice to see they all had a strong focus on equity and differentiation, and really took the feedback that they had gotten from their principal and their mentors and used it to grow. And I'm so grateful to Ms. Mariucci for leading that program and all the mentor teachers who've worked with our new teachers. The May Revise, I know some of you all were there as well, and the learning recovery session that we did as a board, both so exciting to hear about all the new funding that's coming. And it's too bad that it is not all ongoing, but I'm so proud of our staff for figuring out ways to stretch that money over the next few years. I also attended the North County Consortium for Special Education, the NICSE Excellence in Special Education Awards, which was so inspiring and beautiful and moving. They gave awards to not only teachers, but students that did sort of their own initiative with special ed students. I mean, kids in middle school who were designing summer programs for their peers in the special ed program. And one of them talked about how she was leading an inclusion revolution, and just super, super inspiring. And then of course the teachers that are wonderful. And a portrait of an 8th grader, which I was so proud of the way our community came together and really focused on the whole child, and the importance of empathy and service and leading a life of purpose, not just having a career. And then I got to go to the Potter promotion, which was beautiful. And on a personal note, my own 6th grader promoted out of May Ellis, which was also the culmination of 9 years of PTSA volunteer work on my part. So it was a big transition for me too.
Out of May Ellis.
Bittersweet, but the PTSA there did some really nice things for me, which is I'm very grateful for, and I'm grateful for everyone there and at La Paloma where we started, all the teachers there that have contributed to my children, and I'm excited to get involved at Potter and to go back and visit May Ellis. And lastly, my son was especially excited, but I was also excited to find out that the students were able to keep their Chromebooks for the summer and still be able to, use all those resources that we provide for them, the Sora library app and the Thrively, thank you. And all of those online and the YouTube with our firewall safety in place, which is so great because I don't have to worry about what he's looking at. And that's, again, not something every district does, but it's one of those little to us, but huge to a student who maybe not has any other, internet access or computers at home. So that's my report.
Thank you so much. And I also attended a Thrively webinar featuring Dr. Peter Flores, which was, he is from the Center of Leadership, which was excellent. So thank you for including us in the Thrively family. We now start getting emails from them, and it's nice to jump into some of their webinars, and you can also go back and attend past webinars. So it's really a well-designed program, and something that, since our school and our teachers so promoted, I'm trying to interact a little more with that. I wanted to thank Mrs. Norby for the special meeting that she hosted for us. It was really helpful and educational. It's new funding that's coming in, and it did require board approval, and we all attended. And it was about 2 hours of excellent information that I think really helped us understand some of the programs that you're offering to our students. I also attended the San Onofre 8th grade promotion. Very moving. It was military oriented. So touching to see the Marines stand when their song is sung. And I really want to thank the staff and the students who entertained us for that wonderful program. Because it's a smaller campus and a smaller attendance and only 30 graduates, you really had a lot of entertainment that we weren't able to do probably at Potter. And then I attended both the 8:30 and the 11 o'clock Potter Junior High promotion. Brilliant to hold two of them. I almost wish we could keep that, because when I talked to the principal, she was telling me, actually it wasn't the principal, I can't remember who I was talking to, how deep the families go back, that they're at the back of the buildings. So this was a little more intimate. The student speakers were so inspiring. There were 6 student speakers, and they were awesome. They inspired me. I was inspired. And what I liked the most was how they acknowledged their teachers. To have 7th and 8th graders acknowledging their teachers is amazing, because I know when I was in 7th, 8th grade, it was only about me. So they really can see how their teachers have inspired them and given them life lessons and some little reminders, little phrases, little poems that really help propel them forward during this difficult time of COVID. So very impressed. And also wanted to thank the Potter staff for these 2 flawless events. And I also wanted to thank our IT staff for streaming it. Brilliant. So nice, because there are still families, especially the ones who came in from the virtual academy, who might not want to have been present. And their parents and their grandparents, and who knows, were all able to participate. And these are meaningful promotions. I think I called it a service once, so I hope I'm not calling it a service now, a promotion. And then I also attended the last of the portrait of an 8th grader, which was, I really enjoyed being with all these new people, new to me. I haven't had a chance to interact because of COVID mainly with a lot of the teachers, and of course, very few of the students. So this was nice to be able to have conversations with people and hear what is important to them. We spent about $32,000 on this event, and I truly hope that we come out of this with an amazing mission statement and establishing some goals that not only set our students off on a life of service and thinking of others, but also that they have really strong reading and math skills so that they can excel in the career of their choice. And that's the end of my message, but I did want to point out, I would have liked to have attended the Potter and the May Ellis tours, because we as a board voted to go to schools individually. It doesn't take away our interest in attending as a group. So I hope in the future we'll be included. Thank you. That's my board report. And now I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Lieber. Thank you. The only thing, thank you for all of those wonderful comments. It has been busy. I would just echo, Mrs. Lieber, what you were just talking about our student speeches. And they were so meaningful, as they always are. We have children and young people who give speeches and lead. If you noticed, there wasn't a single adult who stood up first in front of any of those. Our students are so brilliant and capable, and we've been working with them for many years in their leadership skills, and you can really see that the older that our students get. But when I was listening to their speeches, I just thought they were so poignant about the impact that the school closures had on them. And the description of their appreciation of their teachers was beautiful. But it made me even that much more, I'm so proud because the kids talked about how meaningful it was for them to be able to come back to school, and how it actually mattered significantly in their life that they were able to be back at school. So as we end the year, we had a very successful end of the school year, and we're about to start every summer program known to man and all the things that we're doing, the cleaning of our buildings and the painting and all the important curriculum work we do in the summer. We're getting all those things are starting now. We do a lot of work in the summer, but I just want to extend, as we always try to do, our gratitude to our teachers and our classified staff. as well as our school administrators, our directors. This has been a heavy lift. And we would not have done it if we didn't all lock arms with our parents and with people in our community to get our kids back to school. And the kids so beautifully reminded me of that during their speeches. So we are off and running in our summer work, and we're really proud of another highly successful school year, given all the hardship that so many of us experience. So Mrs. Lieber, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay, we now will move on to a board operation action item, resolution 24, 2021. And I believe we will have some discussion about this. And this is Libes, this is your initiative. So would you like to begin?
Sure. Excuse me. So I believe
Can I interrupt
that
for a quick second? I'm so sorry, Mrs. Lieber. If we can have a first and a second to begin the discussion, because it just to create the right order of things, that would be helpful. Thank
Do
you.
we have a first?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So discussion.
Okay, to you.
So I think it's, as a board, our students' health and safety and that of our staff has to be our highest priority. If our students don't feel safe, they're not going to learn. If the parents of our students don't feel that they're safe, they're not going to send them to school.
By sending home, a simple letter to our families that will let everyone in the household know what's, proper safety and storage. And, if we reach one person in our community with these letters, I think it's worth doing. So I would ask you to support it.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I have some comments. I don't feel this is board business. I think that we do have a safety committee at our district, and I think this is the safety committee's purview. We have to really pick and choose our battles, and I don't think this is one I want to participate in. I did print out our priorities as a district, and I don't see this as an item here. Of course, safety is our number one concern. That's why we have crossing guards, and that's why we have, we do all we do, we fenced in the schools. But I think we need to really think through what we want to take on as a board. And I think our priorities don't encompass this. And I do appreciate the work you put into it and the work that Dr. Singh has put into it with you. And I think it should be sent to the safety committee for further action. Any more comments? Would you like to make your motion for a vote? I already did. Okay, would you like to vote then? So I will ask Mrs. Lemus. For my vote? Aye. Mrs. Lundeen? Mr. Favela?
I'll say.
And I vote no.
Mr. Favela. Should be a conflict of interest. I don't know.
You know, it's interesting. That's a good question. When we had an action, I don't know what the reason was, but two of the board members abstained, and no one intervened on that one. So I think it's a precedent that we've set that we allow for abstaining when people don't feel like they have all the information they need to make a good decision.
I would say that my interest would be into simply being appropriated, it's not about following rules in one case and not in the other. My interest is in just following the rules all the time. So if that was an error that was made in the past, then we need to correct it and not stay with something that could be incorrect. I think if there's not enough information, you can vote no and not have the information. But you are certainly welcome to continue to do. I just am not sure that that's, I think there is a vote that's necessary.
Appreciate the intent for this. I think it's a good step that you consider. But again, yeah, I still have more questions. And recommendations as well. I just don't feel I can say yes. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not sure if I can say yes to it. What does that put? It's staying. I don't know. I'll say no.
No in its current form.
In current form.
Now, would anybody like to make another motion to do anything else with this resolution? I personally would just like to see it moved on to the safety committee. Should we make a motion to do that?
I don't think we can make a motion if it hasn't been agendized, but I would ask that it be brought back as an agenda item at a future meeting in whatever form you would like to have it. I would like to see a letter go home to our families, however that happens, I don't care. So, a future on agenda.
Okay, now we're moving on to administration, there's an action item. Annual update for local control and accountability plan 2019-20. And the learning continuity and attendance plan for 2021. Before we start with the presentation, I want to thank the district for sending us home these fabulous packets. This particular amount of information is easier to read in a paper format, and they are all sitting on our doorstep, so we arrived home from promotion. So that was very thoughtful. Thank you. Now we'll be making any discussion on this by you, any presentation at all?
Yeah, so we make a motion and open it first.
We make a motion to approve the annual update locally control and accountability plan. Would anybody like to make the motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Mrs. Morby. Somebody going to turn on our presentation for us? Thank you, Seth.
While Mr. Trench does that, let me just say thank you for your attention this evening. So to the governing board members, Dr. Singh, members of cabinet, and our virtual guests, I am going to start off with a quick apology because this is going to be a very long evening for all of us. These plans require some discussion and some presentation to you. And as Mrs. Lieber mentioned there are two plans that we need to discuss right now, and then there's another plan that we'll have another hearing on in just a moment. So I'll be brief where I can, especially as it has to do with what we call the old plan or the first plan, because it's in the past, but I want to give it its just time to explain what analysis we did with that plan. And then I'll be as thorough as I need to be with the new plan that we're going to be hopefully adopting in 2 weeks and moving forward as our map to the future.
Our new clicker. to get
It's our
rid of
new
that.
clicker.
Seth, could you try that?
There we go. Oh, am I not close enough? Okay, all right. So I have the pleasure tonight of presenting to you the 3-year new local control accountability plan. That's kind of the joy of tonight. But I also have the honor of reporting to you on our progress for the last 3, 4, 5 years of these plans. And it was a true moment of pride as I looked back and read the plans, looked at the metrics, and then responded to each of the prompts that the template gives us. It was just a true moment of pride, and I hope that you are able to feel that as well. Well, before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that this is not a single person's plan or project. This is lots and lots of collaboration with all of our stakeholders, collaboration with our parents, our teachers, our classified staff members, our governing board, our cabinet members, our administrators. It's just a very involved process that has many voices that have contributed to all of these plans, including the updates that I'm going to be sharing with you. And then, of course, to my colleagues that I work with to help develop the plans. Ms. Martin and I work side by side to develop all of these plans. And it is important that they are done collaboratively with the business office and then the members in my department who help support the work that we do to gather all of the information and then to do the writing and the proofreading. So definitely a collaborative group project.
Sorry, excuse me. So this is the PowerPoint?
Yes, is a
Thank
hard
you
copy
very much.
of both
Thank you.
presentations.
Thank you, Seth. We are on slide 3. There's 2. Do you have both plans there? So there's one
Yes,
from me and
they're
one
both
from Cindy.
separated.
Yep.
So just-
So this is a graphic that is used often when talking about the LCAP. It's provided to us by the California Department of Education, and it reminds us the LCAP is a continuous cycle of improvement. It doesn't begin or end with the adoption of the plan. We are always self-reflecting. We are always receiving input. We are always looking at data. And this plan, this reflection cycle is pretty predictable with the LCAP and has been since it became law a few years ago. Well, it was predictable until last year because a thing called the pandemic happened and nothing was predictable. So you will remember that technically I should have brought to you last year at this time the update for the annual LCAP for the old plan. And I would have brought to you a brand new plan, a 3-year plan. But that didn't happen. The pandemic did, and the state very wisely suspended that and said, we're going to do that next year. Now, they also very wisely asked us to write the what we call the little LCAP, or the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan, which really was specific to this year. And I'll be giving you an update on that plan as well. So everything is color coded for you. I would love to take credit for that, but the state did that, and your templates are all color coded as such. So the first plan that we're going to be talking about is the pink one. The pink one is the old LCAP. It is kind of, if you think about it, is what we did in the past, what we've done in the past. The green section that we'll talk about secondly is what happened in 2021, what happened right now. So we've got the past, this year, and then what's most important is the blue template that you have there that we'll talk about second. And that's how are we moving forward, and how did we use what we did in our first LCAP and what we did this year in order to determine our action steps or move us forward for the next plan. This graphic here shows you kind of where we are tonight. We're going to do an annual update, which is made up of two parts. The annual update for the old plan that was last year, the last year of, and then the annual update for the learning continuity attendance plan. That's the annual update portion. And then we'll move into the actual approval, well, the first hearing of the new LCAP, which on this graphic says 2021-22, but you'll remember that it's a 3-year plan. So it goes from 2021 to 2024. So some things to remember as we begin to talk about this plan, the old plan. It was written a very long time ago. It was written in 2015-16.
Yeah.
We began implementation of it in the school year of 2016-17. As I already mentioned, the last year should have been last year, and we should have written a new plan last year. You might remember that we were in the middle of getting stakeholder input when everything shut down for the new plan. Our department was in the process of doing the annual update and writing the goals for the new plan when everything shut down. And then I would also say that as you probably reviewed the plan over the weekend, you would notice that many of the metrics weren't there. There was a nice pat phrase that the state gave us that said, due to the COVID-19 school closures, no assessment data exists for that particular metric. Because when we wrote the plan back in 2015-16, you had to write your metrics for each year that you could judge your progress. And you had to say what that metric was. And many times for academic achievement, it was the CASP assessment. And if we didn't have a CASP, then we can't obviously put that down as a metric. So you'll see that phrase throughout that the LCAP that you have there in front of you. There were 4 goals in the old LCAP. You've probably seen them before. You all came to input meetings last year for us where we reviewed kind of things that we were doing. These are the 4 goals. We like to refer to them as the number 1 was kind of our academic and instructional goal. Number 2 was also instructional in nature, but not the hardcore of the mathematics and English language arts, but the other topics that our parents feel so important for our students to have. And then number 3 was what we call our social emotional goal. We want our kids to be in safe schools, safe physically and safe emotionally. So that's kind of where we talk about our social emotional strategies. And then the last goal was around family and community partnerships. You'll see in our new plan, our priorities really have not changed all that much. The data still reflects that these are areas of importance for us, and our stakeholder engagement still reflects that these are areas of importance for us. What we did do, and you'll see a little bit later, is we took goal number 1 and 2 and infused them into one goal under all of kind of the academic topics that we would talk about. So it would be mathematics, English language arts, social studies, science, the arts. We just put them all in one goal as opposed to just calling it out as a separate goal. So what I'd like to do at this time is to go through each of the goals and give you just a very brief analysis of just what we perceived as we look back on the data of the successes and the challenges. Those successes and challenges were determined, as I said, via data, but also from stakeholder input. When we asked them, what did you like about our last plan? What did you think worked with our last plan? And what would be some things that you would like to see us maybe improve upon, which we'll see when we talk about the new plan. This particular annual update asks for us to reflect on not just how we did and what we did, but more importantly, under what did you determine were the successes and what did you determine were the challenges as you tried to implement this plan during a pandemic. So the academic goal, the successes as I look at it and what we heard over and over from our parents, the fact that we were able to get one-to-one mobile technology into our students' hands almost immediately and hotspots that they could access distance learning last year, that was very much a success for this goal. It's very hard to learn virtually if you don't have access to those things. Our distance learning model, even last year, we were able to provide for our parents on that Monday following the school closure. We were able to provide to them hard copies of units of instruction aligned to content standards for every grade level and also have access to that electronically. So I was proud of the distance learning that we were able to offer last year, and even more proud of it this year when we had some proper training over the summer on how to use some tools that were discovered over that time. Timely and appropriate PD. Last year, it was very important that we were able to give our teachers the professional development they needed, knowing that we were probably going to be starting the school year in distance learning again. Our teachers were very specific and clear about what they wanted, and they were very clear that they wanted it earlier in the summer than later. And our district TOSAs and our STEM TOSAs were able to do that for us last year. One of the things that we heard over and over again in our stakeholder engagement was our school to home communication last year. It was praised from every group that we spoke to. And having been a part of this profession now for 39 years and going through many strategic plans and many updates of different plans, that is an area that you can almost consistently guarantee you're going to hear negative comments about and wish for improvement. So it was a very welcomed joy for me to hear that, like I said, every stakeholder appreciated our timely communication, our relevant communication, and the variety of ways in which we communicated, that we did it electronically, we did it via text, via email, via the website, via social media, in print, in the newspaper. So they very much appreciated that, and they wanted to continue. Challenges. You're going to see this first dot on every single goal, because the first challenge was that we were in the middle of a pandemic trying to execute a plan that was written not knowing we were going to be in the middle of a pandemic and having schools closed. So that was a challenge throughout everything that we did last year and into this year. We had many initiatives that were interrupted because school closed down. We were in the middle of working with the County Office of Education on our student oracy for our English language learners. We weren't able to continue that. We were in the middle of the portrait of an 8th grader at the end of last year. We had to wait until this year to continue it. So there were many things that we were working on that just had to stop. And that was a challenge because you build momentum and you want it to keep going, and then it's not there. We had some wonderful initiatives happening at Potter Junior High last year, and working with some outside consultants and just building momentum, and then it had to stop. So that was a challenge, I think, for everybody. I don't know that every district would agree with this, but for us, the suspension of CAS and other state and local assessments was a challenge for us. We spent a lot of time last year very carefully analyzing our data from the year before and putting in place initiatives and programs and consultants and training to very intentionally meet those gaps that we were seeing. And we were very excited to see the growth that we anticipated that our students were making because of those initiatives. And so I know that a lot of my colleagues were excited that we didn't have to do CASP last year. We weren't. We were very sad by that because we were looking forward to what that assessment might show us. So I'm going to pause after each one of our goals. So if there is something that you want to comment on, we'll pause at the very end of all 4 goals for a more comprehensive conversation. But if there's something about this particular goal you'd like to comment on, this would be the time to do that.
Mrs. Norby, do we have STAR 360 data from 2019, or did we just start?
We just started it this year. We had a few teachers who were using a free version of it, but in terms of it being our universal screener, it just started this year. Great question. Thank you. I would also add that as you saw in the actual plan, there were many more successes listed and other challenges. I just chose to highlight a few of them for the purpose of this conversation tonight. So goal number 2, this was that broad course of study that we talked about. We did increase our fine arts opportunities last year. That's something that has always come up in our stakeholder input. But one of those challenges that we talked about in terms of the school closures, they stopped in March. So, schools that might have been scheduled for spring opportunities didn't get to have those. So although it was a success, it also was a challenge because of the school closure. One of the things that we heard was about 6th grade band when we weren't able to do that anymore because we didn't have a music teacher in our elementary schools. Our parents wanted that as an offering. So we partnered with a local agency here in Fallbrook, CAST, and one of our previous music teachers actually worked with our 6th graders. And that was a real success. And I'd like to see something like that begin again. the challenge of that was that they worked so hard all year and then weren't able to do their spring concert. So those were those end of the year celebrations that didn't happen that are so important to culminate something. That was a challenge that we didn't get to have those. Our STEM and innovation labs, you speak about something that had gained momentum over the years. Our teachers were just beginning to implement those units of instruction that we had worked on. Our classroom teachers were partnering with our STEM instructor teachers to do an into in the classroom, maybe, and then an experiment in the lab, and then follow back up in the classroom. And when we talk about initiatives that were postponed, the loss of our innovation lab teachers this current year, if you remember, we were not sure where our budget was going to be last year, and that was an expense that we decided that we needed to pause on. And that was a challenge, I think, as we move forward into this year then. And then I think Thrively and our personalized learning opportunities. The fact that our teachers are using it, our students love it, our counselors are using, our administrators are using it. And I've been in conversations with their new education consultant, and he and I have already begun to plan what next year might look like and how we can re-engage again. I'm thinking that it's a good time for all of our students to retake the assessment next year. Some of our students took it 3 or 4 years ago when we first started it. Some of our new students took it this last year, but we're also recognizing we're all in a much different place now than we were 3 years ago or even 2 years ago. So to retake that, and some students will come out with the same passions and interests and some won't, but it'll have current data then. And I think that will rejuvenate our teachers as well. And Thrively has done a lot to make their platform more user-friendly for us. So I think it's a good time to re-energize. I spoke about some of those challenges. I think one of the other sad ones for us was the suspension of Duluth, so that our students last year in the spring did not get to go to Duluth if they were scheduled for it in the spring, and then of course into this year. So those were our main challenges in that area. Any comments about goal number 2?
Cass, 6th graders, which school sites?
It was all of our in-town schools had the opportunity to participate. And I'm sorry, I don't remember how many students participated.
And what instruments?
All instruments. She had wind and
She ported them from school to school, and they were.
no, they all went to the facility in town, the cast facility, and she met them there and they did lessons there. We
And
provided the instruments free of cost and the lessons were free of cost.
then they were bused there, or they walked there?
They self-transported.
And it was immediately after school?
Mhm.
And what percentage participated? Do you
I
know?
think somewhere in here it said 60.
60 something? Is that?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Levis. I'm going to say 60 something. The data's in here. That's one of the reasons that these plans take so long to write.
yes.
It's not the actual writing, it's the culminating of all of the data you have to discover, right? So goal number 3. This, as I said, our social emotional goal, that we want our schools to be safe places, physically safe for our students and our staff, but we also want them to be a place where they feel good about coming to school and they feel safe at school from an emotional, social emotional level. You will see in our new LCAP, this is really highlighted. This came out very strong in our stakeholder groups, and not surprising based on what we've been through this past year. Our successes are listed there. We have very low suspension rates across our district. One of the challenges with that is that we do have some of our subgroups that fall higher in that. And that's an area that we have written some goals for in our new LCAP. But overall, our suspension rate is less than 1%, which is very, very good. Chronic absenteeism is very low. As I already mentioned, having those learning plans available for our students, I think that made our students feel safe. I think it gave them a sense of consistency. The fact that our teachers called them immediately that first week, not once, not twice, but numerous times to check in with them before we had the whole Google Classrooms all set up for some of our younger students. I think those were things that made our students feel safe and feel loved, and that school was going on and that their life had some consistency to it. Our counselors were remarkable last year. The resources that they provided for our families and for our teachers, the resources online, as well as them calling students, them calling families, them working with teachers to provide lessons, definitely would count that as a success. And then we have spoken numerous times about child nutrition. Our child nutrition services department was amazing last year. The fact that they were able to serve meals consistently, again, beginning on the Monday, the first day of the school closures throughout the summer and throughout this year, was a yeoman's effort on their part. I would also say it was challenging for them because with every phase of our reopening, their plan for meal preparation and meal distribution had to change. That was very challenging. They also, remember, were our frontline workers when everybody else was home. They were out there. And we did have some people who got sick, or we had some people who needed to isolate because somebody in their family was sick. So it was very challenging. And our CNS department did a fabulous job of maintaining this throughout the year for us. Any comments about goal number 3?
You know, one of the things that's so exciting to me about child nutrition services is how the district embraced entire families. And, you know, families are a unit, and no student operates independent of that. And as you say, it required a phenomenal amount of work to make that happen. So congratulations on that to you and the staff, because I think when kids aren't suffering hunger, they can focus on schoolwork.
Yeah, that's right.
So thank you
So
for that.
true, so true. That's right. And our last goal that we want to give an update on is our family community partnerships. As you can imagine, this one is pretty tough when we are closed and we aren't allowing visitors on our campuses. So that was difficult to maintain some of those engagements for our families. And they talked to us a lot. They talked to us a lot about that in our stakeholder inputs, that they miss that and they want it back, and they want it back in robust forms and in as many different and variety of ways as they can. Certainly moments of celebration on our campuses, but also they want authentic leadership opportunities on our campuses, and to know what those opportunities are. So you'll see those action steps in our LCAP too. And I think I mentioned already the home to school communication. The community partnership with Spectrum and with Verizon, with our Boys and Girls Club to help support our students were all very meaningful as we went through last year. I think, as I mentioned already, the spring events that weren't able to happen were very sad and a challenge, because people prepare for those and they are part of a culmination, and they are part of what brings a school community together. And the fact that all of our summer programs were virtual, you know, that was a challenge. One, we weren't as adept at it in June as we became by August, but we usually have very robust migrant program and special education summer programming, and those were both very reduced opportunities for our students.
Before we go on, I just think we have another group to acknowledge with that one, which was the IT department. And I wasn't here when it happened, but I've heard how you get Chromebooks to almost 5,000 kids and hotspots and I mean, what a phenomenal job.
Yes.
So I know the credit is broad, but specifically the IT
Yes,
department.
absolutely.
Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for making that happen.
Absolutely.
Phenomenal, because so many other districts couldn't do that. And what an impact it has on our kids in terms of their learning, because they just move seamlessly through it. So thank you.
Without a doubt. Thank you. Sorry, I have too many computers going on. I'm on the right side. Where is everybody else? Anything else about the pink plan? All righty. Oh, yes, Mr. Favela.
Question, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm looking at the years 2018 to 2019. And the pandemic started in 20, right? So
Well, and that's the confusing part about this plan. This plan should have ended last year, but it didn't. So we had to go ahead and update data from last year. All righty, we are going to move to the green plan. This is the plan that was written. We received the requirements of the template in August, and we had to approve it by September 1. So it was a very quick turnaround. The good news is it wasn't a real difficult plan to write. the original plan that we wrote, because you just had to kind of write what you thought you were going to be doing during the year and the plans. Now, for us, that was pretty easy because we had a very robust plan already in place. We had, if you remember, groups that had come together from across the district. I'll talk about those in just a minute, but all of that pre-work made writing this plan in August very, very simple for us. So some things to remember. This was part of Senate Bill 98 that said that you don't have to do your LCAP, but you get to do this instead, which was perfect because it was much more appropriate and applicable. And it also was specific to the unique challenges of what we were going to be facing this year. Face-to-face learning in a pandemic, home instruction, virtual learning, hybrid learning, child nutrition, IT. So it was very specific to all of those different areas that had to do with this year. So before I begin, I want to thank Dr. Singh and all of the committees for the work that we did back in March, April, May. The structure, as you might remember, if you were on the board, was such that we had committees that for every feasible area of the workings of a school district, whether it was facilities, whether it was HR, curriculum, transportation, every group had a subgroup. And those subgroups were made up of the leader of that department. So the director of transportation, say, for example, was made up of teachers, it was made up of administrators, and some of our committees even had parents on them. And the purpose of that was to plan for what we were going to be doing. And we wanted the perspective of all of the different stakeholders so that we didn't forget anything. And the plan was, the idea was to think about all the things that you might need to think about, not knowing what you even need to think about yet, right? Now it'd be easy to do going back, but then we were making it up as we went. We didn't know, but that actually increased the brainstorming that we did because we were planning for the unknown. And so it was because of that it made all of those different categories much easier. When we started planning in the spring, we didn't know that these were the categories, but I can tell you they were the categories that we were planning for. So again, one of the reasons that it made it that much easier for us to write this plan. So thank you, Dr. Singh, for having the foresight to put that structure in place for us. So those are the different components of the LCAP. I've included the page numbers for you. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but I'm going to highlight a couple of them. So as I said, one of our successes was that early, careful planning. We could not have done and accomplished what we accomplished this year without that. It just would not have happened. And it is the reason that I believe so many districts weren't able to open, especially when I think about our junior high. You know, lots of elementary schools were able to figure it out as we went on, but very few middle schools and high schools were able to figure it out. And it is only because we demanded of our administration at Potter that they, and San Onofre, that they do stable cohorts and that they create their schedule around a cohort of kids where teachers move into them as opposed to kids moving out and separate and mixing. So we knew about stable cohorts before they were even cool. But it is what allowed us to bring our students back to Potter without a doubt. I just 100% know that. Another success is that we had a common purpose, and it came from the top and it went all the way down to the students, or the other way around if we want to think about the students on top. I always like that graphic too, but we had a common purpose, and that was, how do we get our students back and our staff back on our campuses safely and quickly? That was it. And whatever it took to do that, we were going to do it. And everybody just said, yep, I'm in. What do I need to do? Whether it was bus drivers being custodians, whether it was child nutrition, changing their plan 23 times, whether it was IT, getting Chromebooks out of the back of a van to students. I mean, it was a cooperative spirit that said, we're all in this together and we're going to do it because it's what is right for kids. And I believe that was one of our greatest successes. Let's see, our curriculum committee, the fact that we had this committee of teachers that were committed. I mean, we met numerous times for numbers of hours on every phase of the reopening. They would come together and meet and talk about what they needed as teachers to make this next phase open. I know many districts who didn't ask their teachers what they needed. And guess what? It didn't work so well. I mean, you need to ask the people who are doing the work what they need to do the work. And we had a structure in place to do that. So definitely a success. And I think you can see the ones on the other side. I think our parent our community member who wrote in tonight for a public hearing mentioned this, the fact that we had face-to-face instruction beginning in October, and that all of our kids were back in February and March, 5 days a week. It's something to be really proud of, and I am. And that we did put an emphasis on the social well-being of our students. This has been a very traumatic year for our students, some of them who lost family members, for our staff. Our entire world was turned upside down. And it's kind of now, as we look back, I dare use the analogy you gave today, but it's kind of like childbirth. If you're a woman, you kind of forget what it was like, and I think we kind of forget what it was really like a year ago at this time, because we did it, and we did it in what appeared to be such a smooth and seamless way. But it was hard work. And our attendance rates, we had upwards from 94%, between 94 and 97% attendance rate throughout the entire year. So I'm very proud of that in our re-engagement plan. But there were some challenges, as you can imagine. Excuse me just a second. The uncertainties of a pandemic. We did not know what was going to happen next week. We did not know what guidelines would change with CDPH. We would plan for something, and then we would get new guidelines. We would think we were going in a direction, and then the state would change something. So just that uncertainty made it very challenging, as you would imagine. Social distancing, although certainly understandable, made it very challenging to bring students back to school, made it very challenging to bring staff back to school. I think our parents very appropriately let us know that the lack of general education transportation was a real challenge for them. And although they did their darndest to get their kids to school or to do the virtual learning academy, it's something that they missed and was a challenge for them as well. Certainly, kudos to our HR department. We hired a lot of teachers and staff this year to lower that class size so that we could get kids back. That's hard to recruit that many teachers, and it's hard to get that many teachers onboarded in a timely fashion and to get them trained and up to speed. So that was another challenge. And then you can see over on the right-hand side, I would just point out maybe on the right-hand side, one that people maybe don't think about very much. Contact tracing and isolation was a huge challenge. And that has nothing really to do with educating our kids per se, but it was a huge amount of time and manpower for every child who might come to school and say, or for every parent who might call and say, my husband tested positive. You have to do contact tracing now for every person that child has come in contact with. So again, our stable cohorts really helped us with that and allowed us to keep our schools open. And because we had gotten very good at distance learning, we were able, if we had to isolate a whole class, we were able to do that without them losing instructional time. And I think that's a success that we were able to do it. Challenge we had to, but a success that we were able to do it. I don't want to be confusing that. Any questions about the successes or challenges that are there?
Again, I wasn't here for it because I hadn't been elected to the board at that time, but from what I've heard from teachers, the second item on that right column, learning to teach and learn online, the district did, from what I hear back, a phenomenal job of professional development for our teachers and helping to enable them. This wasn't something that anybody learned in school when they were training to become teachers.
That's right.
And, I can't imagine that challenge. And I think kudos to the district for having done such a great job of providing that professional development. So
Thank you.
thank you. Well done.
One of the things that I think was so great about that professional development too was that it was all recorded. And so teachers who couldn't do it live could go back and watch it on their own. And the same thing with our parent professional development. We did sessions on how to access Google Classroom, how to give an email and all those different things. And they were also recorded in Spanish so that our parents could go back and access those. So the next and the last part of the green section on this is that you had to kind of do an overall analysis of how the year went, and equally as important, how it all informed your work as you moved forward. So so just kind of put it into these easy terms here. I think together we rock. That's just my overall analysis of this year, that this team and what we were all able to accomplish, and it was all, as I mentioned before, we just rock. And I'm so, so proud to be a part of this team, to have been able to do the work that we did. And when I talk to people, not just colleagues, but just people in the community and in my own personal circles, I'm proud to be able to share that this is what Fallbrook did, and it didn't happen in isolation. So it happened with a lot of careful planning and common purpose. So that would be my overall analysis. But lessons learned that moved us forward into the new LCAP would be safety remains a top priority. We heard that from staff and we heard that from students, that just because we are on the other side of this, that doesn't mean we want our safety protocols to be lax as we move forward. We know that we have some learning gaps that we have to go back in and fill for our students academically. We know that we also want to be accelerating their progress and not holding them back. And as I mentioned earlier, social emotional health came out very high, that we do not want to forget what everybody has been through this year, and that coming and returning to school full day and different challenges will exist with that. And we want to make sure we're preparing our children and staff for that. Timely communication, we heard that loud and clear, and we'll continue to do that. And then I think the thing that runs ever through all of our planning and our plans is that it is imperative that we have equal access to learning opportunities in everything we do. And everything you say you're going to do, then you need to look at it from the lens of the students who might be more challenged in accessing that, and how are you going to do that for them. And I think you will see, we learned that this year very loud and clearly, as many schools did, with lack of technology and what that might do in terms of inequity. So everything as we move forward, as Fallbrook has always tried to do, and we'll have that as our lens. So I will pause here for any questions or comments about the green plan.
I think you should be proud, and I'm very proud of our district as well. It was really a team effort, and like you said, it was everybody on the same side pushing in the same direction made it happen.
So true, so true. Okay. Then I believe it is time for you to take action, hopefully, and approve these two plans. It's actually one plan, 2-in-1 plan.
Okay, so should we call it the 2-in-1 plan?
Yeah. That's awesome.
So we do have a motion and a second to approve the 2-in-1 plan, which is the annual update local control and accountability plan for 2019-20, and the learning continuity and attendance plan for 2020-2021. So we'll take a vote. Mrs. Lundin.
Aye.
Mr. Favela.
Aye.
Mrs. Libas.
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right.
We have the public hearing next, I think, for the next plan, correct? Okay.
So you're turning it back to me.
Yes.
Back to you.
Hand it back.
Handing the baton to you.
So thank you very much for that excellent presentation. You so prepared us for something long. I was waiting.
Thinking it was longer.
Waiting.
It feels like it's
for
pretty long to me.
We might still be here. So you good to over prepare and under prepare and over.
Well, I'm not finished yet.
Okay, so now we're moving on to action.
Number 2.
Number 2, the first read of the 2021-2022 budget.
No public hearing.
No, am I off? I'm sorry, I totally off. We're number 2 and administration. So public hearing 2021 through 2024, local control and accountability plan, which is also called the LCAP.
You open the public hearing, Mrs. Lieber.
Okay, yes.
Just open the public hearing, see if we
I
have
would
any
like to open
comments.
the public hearing.
Do we have any comments?
Do we have any call-ins or comments?
Okay, so we can close the public
So I'll
hearing.
close the
Yep.
public hearing.
Perfect.
And now we will go on to the first read of the 2021-24 LCAP.
It's in the same plan. Yeah, it's all.
There we
in
go.
Yeah, it's just the next slide.
Here we go.
Now it's the new plan. So you are in the blue section of your plan. This is the one that was delivered to you separately, and it should be in your notebook, I believe.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Trench. So I know that we have some newer board members. I'm not going to spend a long time giving kind of a background on the LCAP, but I wanted to just remind us of a few things about it. First of all, it is a 3-year plan, unless there's a pandemic, and then it's more, but it's a 3-year plan. It's very prescriptive in its components. It tells us exactly what we must address and what goals, not goals, but what priorities we must be addressing. It has a very tight template that we must follow and that we have to abide by, and that it is designed to reflect the needs of our unduplicated students. Those would be our English language learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged, foster youth, and homeless youth and homeless. Although it can certainly address the needs of all students, but it has to primarily focus on those. An example I always like to give with that is lower class sizes. We're not going to take all of our unduplicated students and put them in a lower class and keep everybody else in a larger class. Lower class sizes are good for all kids, but certainly are ones that have more challenges or more headwinds, as we say, benefit more from a smaller class possibly than a child who doesn't. So it can be used for all students, but you have to, those actions need to be things that you can justify, meet the needs of your unduplicated students first. So those 8 priorities that I spoke about are listed here on this page for you. And each of these need to be addressed somewhere in your LCAP. And they need to be reported out in terms of the progress each year. And they're very things that you would expect. They're the research that shows what makes effective schools. So we know, for example, that it's important that you have credentialed teachers and that you have teachers in the right assignments. We know that the good facilities that look nice and are safe and clean, I like to use and inspiring, that those are things that make a difference for children. So these are, nothing here is rocket science. It's just that you have to make sure that the state says you address them. Academic achievement, parent involvement, pupil engagement. We know that if kids don't come to school, it's really hard to teach them. So we want to make sure that our chronic absenteeism rate is low and that our suspension rate is low. We want to make sure that children feel good about our schools. So you want to make sure that school climate is something that you're focusing on. So like I said, again, not rocket science, but all research based on all things that must be addressed in your LCAP, and some of which are addressed multiple times in the LCAP. So the components of the plan are listed there for you, and they're also in your plan. It kind of shows you a table of contents, but these are things that you must have in your plan. And I'm going to briefly kind of go through each of them as we review the plan. I'll go into a little bit more detail with this plan than I did with the update, because it's the plan that we're going to be working on now. So I want to make sure you have a more thorough understanding of it, but I won't go into finite detail because it's all outlined for you in the action steps. So the first thing that you'll find, and you'll see up in the top right-hand corner, it shows you what page number you can find those in the blue plan. So on page 2 and 3, it talks about the very first thing it asks you to do is to go back and reflect. Go back and reflect on what are the successes. This would be like when we were doing your stakeholder input, you say what worked, and then it would go on to what would you like to see us do. So these were the things that were listed both from a data perspective when we researched, when we reviewed our data, as well as when we looked at our stakeholder input as to what were the things that worked, because those are the things you want to continue to do in your new LCAP. And then looking at what were some identified needs so that you could make sure that you then created goals or actions around those. I would point out that we had, as I said before, the low absenteeism rate and low suspension rates are definitely successes, although we recognize that we have some subgroups that we need to really focus on providing extra support in those areas. One of our big successes as we move into the new LCAP is the adoption of our new English language arts materials, which we'll be bringing to you in 2 weeks for adoption. They're on public display, that's not the right word,
Review.
public review starting today. So they're in our office and anybody can come and look at them, and that's posted on our website as well as in the newspaper. But we're very excited about these materials. Our teachers have been asking for this for a while, and we have been searching for appropriate programs that we could offer to our teachers. And there were a variety of them this year. So we'll do a whole presentation on that next meeting, but it's a definite success that is going to, in this plan. To go along with that, our literacy coaches, they are going to be instrumental in helping us implement this new English language arts curriculum, as well as help support our reading intervention teachers as we move forward on really focusing on first best instruction for our students. We always say that the best intervention is first best instruction, so that we don't have to intervene. They're getting that focus, strong literacy focus early on with our students. So those will be needs that we've identified and that we will continue to work on. And then continuing to improve and enhance our positive behavior intervention and support plans. Highlights that you'll see. This is something that you actually go back. It's very interesting to me that it comes up at the beginning of the plan, but it makes sense, I guess, if you kind of want the big picture down to the little picture, but you actually write these last. So you write your whole plan and then you go back and you write your highlights. But these are things that I've just highlighted for you that I think are going to have the most impact as we move forward. There are many more actions and metrics in our plan, but these are the ones that I think are going to make a difference and that respond to our data and our stakeholder input. I've spoken about most of the ones in the academic and instruction. The broad course of study, we are very excited about Duluth returning. We have Mr. Gordon and a team of teachers actually working. They begin, I think, next week or 2 weeks, working on revamping our units for them, keeping what works, and but then also expanding it to meet the environmental education standards. So we're excited about that. We're excited about the expanded environmental literacy standards across our grade level and having a continuum of that. We have been working with Luminary Arts. We have a meeting scheduled with them to really provide a robust visual and performing arts opportunity for our students. They were an excellent company that we partnered with in the past and provided really quality programs for our students. This is where they come in and they actually, it's not an assembly, they actually work with a class on drama or dance or movement. So we are working with them to create a contract that is extensive, that our funds will be able to help us support. Mathematical enrichment, and then that PBL authentic learning, which we heard so much about in our portrait of an 8th grader, both from our students and our parents, that they want authentic real life opportunities to apply the skills that they're learning. And then the other 2 areas of the highlights, we're excited about the possibility of bringing on a social worker. We think that that's going to be somebody who can really help us understand the broad base of community resources that are out there for our families and allow them to free up our school counselors to do the more small group and one-on-one work with students there. And then the district wellness committee, that's something that kind of, I know our district has had in the past, but is going to be reborn this year. And I think with new intention and new focus based on where we have been and where we're going. And then, as I said to you before, our parents have asked for even more parent opportunities to be on our campuses and to have leadership opportunities. And we're excited to be bringing on the 7 Habits of Successful Families to our parents to kind of bridge that, what we do in our schools and the language we use in our schools with how they can do that in their homes. And then expansion of our community partnerships. So we have strong ones with Boys and Girls Club and Fallbrook Music Society, but it's to really expand those partnerships this next year. So those would be kind of the highlights as I see them as we go through the plan. One more slide and then we'll take a pause. Stakeholder engagement is one of the first sections of the plan, and it's because it is so critical to the creation of the plan. There are very specific requirements as to whom you must ask to give input. You can't just have 1 or 2 meetings. You actually have to list, as you saw on the plan, every meeting that you had and every opportunity that you had for input. It needs to be a variety of groups and a variety of people. And then you have to give a summary of that input in the plan. And more importantly, which I think is even the most important part, is a description of how that input influenced your plan. So if you had stakeholders who said you want A, B, and C, did you put it in your plan and why? What data do you have to support that it will actually make a difference for children in their student outcomes or student achievement? So before we go into the actual goals, any questions or comments about the structure of the plan? And thank you for being so kind and nodding up there. I know that's a lot of information, and thank you to my colleagues all sitting here listening so attentively.
So much of it is things we've been talking about. for
Exactly.
months, it's really not new. It's,
No.
it's new in this package.
No,
but it's
you are
things-
exactly right, Mrs. Levis. And one of the things I neglected to say this time regarding stakeholder input, I know I've said it to you before, our stakeholder input was consistent across every group that we spoke to, whether it was the families at La Paloma or the families at San Onofre or the DLAC group or the PTOs or the PTAs, the principals, the teachers. The consistency of what everybody wanted was really remarkable. And I will say it made writing this plan very easy. And you didn't kind of have to pick and choose. You really were able to take the ones that really surfaced to the top for everybody. And I think it just speaks to how well everybody knows where our students are and knows what our students need. So I think that we're doing a really good job communicating that out to our stakeholders as well. Okay. So we have 3 broad goals this year in our new LCAP, as opposed to the 4. Again, an academic one, a social emotional, and an engagement goal, as you can see there, and kind of the broad categories that might fit under each of those goals. You'll start to see written in here, you'll start to see the 8 state priorities and the language that's used in those, because you must represent them in one way or another in your plan. So 3 goals. And then with each goal, excuse me, there's metrics and actions. So metrics are how will you measure that progress? And how will you know if you have success? They have a very specific list of ways that you must measure your progress, and I've included some of those there. The California dashboard, which you'll hear more about when we actually have a dashboard, that was suspended this last year in most categories. Obviously, state and local assessments, the CASP, or in our case, the STAR 360. Reclassification rates, surveys that you can use, our SARC reports, our FIT reports, all of those things are data points that you can use. So it can be quantitative as well as qualitative. And then the next section you have for each goal is the actions. So if those are the things that you want to accomplish, the metrics that you want to accomplish, what actions will you do in order to accomplish those goals? What actions will bring you success? That might be hiring new and different or more staff, new materials, professional development. Okay, so we're going to start with goal 1, and we're going to walk through it a little bit more slowly so you get the pattern of how each goal works. So you'll notice that, I'm on my right side here, that it has in your packet on page, you'll start on page 9, you'll see the goal is listed there. And then there is an explanation of why it was developed. So it could be data related, or it might be stakeholder input, or both. And then it has the metrics. The metrics, as you'll notice, on the left-hand column is the actual metric you're going to use. The first column is what is your baseline? That's your metric, what's your baseline? What are your students scoring right now if you're using an academic achievement? What are the condition of your facilities right now? You'll notice year 1, 2, and 3 are empty, because we'll report on those. Next year, we'll report at the end of year 1 on how we compared on our metric, and year 2 and year 3. But what you will notice is that the very last column is what is your desired outcome 3 years from now, or the 4th year out? And then you work your way backwards. So if you say you're going to grow your achievement by 12 points, then you divide that over 3 years and probably would have a steady increase of 4 points. So, but you do the long-term goal outcome at the end. You'll notice there are lots of metrics, and then after the metrics, you will come to the actions. We'll spend most of our time talking about the actions, but you can certainly go back and look at the metrics of how we will measure progress on those actions. So in goal number 1, I told you it's kind of the academic goal. This is the one where instruction and academic achievement, those are the things listed there that we are thinking will make the most difference in this particular goal. Obviously, high quality staff. We know that that's most important, the teacher in the classroom. And then we've already talked about literacy coaches, intervention teachers. We're excited to be bringing back our innovation lab teachers, that lower class size. None of those, as you so eloquently said, Mrs. Leibus, there's nothing new here. These are things that we've been talking about all the way through our planning. The enhanced environmental education opportunities. And then we have a strong action in there about enhanced mathematical opportunities for our students. That was something that came through as additional STEM opportunities, but in the area of mathematics. So Math Olympiad, robotics, and coding, those are things that will be happening at our schools as well. We've talked about the other ones. Any comments or questions about goal number 1?
Can I just ask for a little guidance? So as I started in the goals section, when I was reviewing it over the weekend, you said we can go back and take a look at that. If I were trying to match, for example, high quality staff literacy coaches, where would I start to find that? Because I see it's from page 9 to 19. Is that what starts to happen under actions?
Yep, they would start to, you would see them under actions. You may see them in the metrics, but they would mainly be in the actions. And I think that what will help you is when Miss Martin gives her presentation, we actually have a chart that will, especially with staffing, that will show exactly which goal it's related to and which action. But for example, high quality staff would be action number 1, fully credentialed and appropriately assigned teachers. Literacy coaches are listed in goal number 4, in action number 4. Intervention teachers, so they're all in each of those different actions, they would be aligned to those.
Okay, thank you.
You betcha.
Page
Sound like
16.
You betcha. Access to broad course of studies where you would see things like the enhanced environmental education, so forth, math things, expanded fine arts.
Great, thank you.
Anything else about goal number 1? Goal number 2. Goal number 2 is our school climate or social emotional goal. You can read that one up there. Again, it's about providing a safe environment, both physically and socially and emotionally. And those are the actions that we believe will bring us the greatest success in this particular goal. We've talked about all of them already. I don't think there's anything on there that is new to you. Again, that district-wide wellness committee that we talked about, continuing with Leader and Me, trauma-informed practices, PBIS, and then that cultural proficiency that we really are being sensitive to the different cultures that we represent our student body and our staff in our schools. Seeing no hands, I'll move to number 3.
Can I go back?
Yes, please.
Same question. Where do I find that beginning?
Okay, so goal number 2, if you look up in the right-hand corner, it says page 20 and 25.
Got it, okay.
So if you go to page 20, that's where goal number 2 starts. And you'll have the goal, why it was developed, the metrics, and then beginning on page 23, you'll have the actions.
Super. Thank you.
This is why we have a first read and then the
Exactly.
action.
Yeah, and I
Exactly
read this
right.
over the weekend.
That's
and I'm
exactly
looking at it
exactly
now
right.
going, okay, now it's real clear there, but how does it
Right,
fit?
right. And
So-
things like, so, some of them would make more sense. Obviously, social worker and counselors are going to be in behavioral and academic support. So some of them are pretty easy to put into a nice place. School facilities, that's where safe, clean, inspiring facilities come in. So some of them are really easy, but their explanations are pretty short for the action. So it should be fairly easy to match them across the goals, the actions. Hopefully they're all there. They are.
They will be.
I know they are. Goal number 3, our last goal, remember we only have 3 goals this next year, is that one about family engagement and partnerships with our community. This one starts on page 26 in your plan. And the actions start on page
26.
30.
Oh, 30, okay.
Again, these are things you've heard about, our bilingual community support assistance. We're very excited about what that's going to be able to do. Having one at each school in order to increase and support communication with our families and to let them know about the opportunities that are available for them and invite them personally to attend those. We've talked about the 7 Habits of Successful Families, our communication access to technology, both in the summer and during the school year, and then those expanded partnerships. And I'll pause here for questions or comments. That concludes this portion of the LCAP, the main components of the LCAP. And Steve, I so appreciate your comment about that's why we have 2 weeks, because now you kind of get an overview and you can go back and kind of match things and certainly sending an email to Dr. Singh if you have questions, I'd be happy to help respond.
And then we move toward the expenditure tables with the breakouts there of what all of this costs. Thanks.
Anything that has a dollar sign next to it, I let Mrs. Martin talk about. The next section is the federal addendum. This is new, beginning last year, that it needed to be connected with the LCAP. We've always had an addendum. It was called something different, but last year or 2 years ago, it was required that it become part of the actual LCAP. This is what Dr. Curcio really oversees, and she apologizes for not being able to be here this evening. But really, in summary, I would just tell you that it is about a plan that she must write that outlines all of the different title monies that we receive, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, which are explained in this PowerPoint for you. I won't spend a lot of time going through it, but you have access to that. But each of those title fundings have requirements of what you need to spend the money on. So for example, if it's Title II money, trigger happy. Title II money, that's about preparing, training, and recruiting high quality teachers. So you can't use that money for something else. You have to do it for Title II. And then what she does is when she's writing her action steps, they have to align with our LCAP goals, right? So it all goes together. So she can't write something in her federal addendum to spend federal monies on that isn't outlined in some way in our LCAP. And we'll show you how we've connected those for you. So this just explains to you what the federal addendum is, which is what I just basically told you. And then these are the different titles that she oversees and the monies that are generated from those and what they are used for. And then what she did is she did a slide for each of the different titles. So for Title I, which is about improving academic achievement. So you could imagine that most of her action steps will be aligned to goal number 1 in the LCAP, right? Because that's the academic goal. So you'll see that, but there are places where goal number 2 fits into that as well. So that's what she's listed the actions in the federal addendum. You have a copy of the actual federal addendum in your plan. And then we've highlighted which goal is associated with that. And you have that for Title I, 2, 3, and 4. Happy to go into more detail on any of those, but I think that it's really, this particular one is pretty self-explanatory. Any questions about the federal addendum? Well, let me tell you what's next then.
Before we go to that, then I do have a question.
Oh, yes.
So starting on page 34, where we have the expenditure tables, will we be getting a briefing from Mrs. Martin on the breakout, or will we get additional materials that break out the categories and how they're being spent? Just the next level of
Yeah,
detail.
part of it will be in some of what I present. We can probably put something together that goes into more detail. The state did change the template because they used to have it where that you had to put specific, whether it was a teacher or a professional service, whatever, and they found that, believe it or not, to be too cumbersome. The state identified that, and that's why they changed it to this format. You'll see me tote around, not just this one, but a binder about this big that has a copy of every single thing and why the cost, how I came up with the cost for that as a backup, be it an invoice or the budget or somebody's salary. So I have all the detail of it. We just don't have it in a format that, because it's not required for this LCAP, but I'd be happy to, try and put something together or include it as something we give you as part of your budget book, that we're giving you the additional paperwork.
Yeah.
It might take me a little bit to do that, but so that you can see the actual detail and know what we're talking about. Because I know that it's the teacher induction program or the, whatever, I have the details of that, but for this format, it wasn't required. As a matter of fact, they didn't want you to put it in, they just wanted personnel costs or non-personnel costs broken out that way. So I'll be happy to put something together that says each action and what we're talking about that makes it better.
I think too, I should have reminded us also that although the board, the governing board approves this plan, our audience for this report for this is the stakeholders. So we write it for stakeholders and they create the template so that it's easy for stakeholders to read. So that's why it may not show in this template, but remember that all of our expenditures you approve as we move forward through the year. So like when we put professional development on here, I had to give Mrs. Martin a list of the anticipated professional developments that we're going to do. So that's why it's kind of the expected expenditures as opposed to what the actual expenditures will be at the end of the year. So when we report to you at the end of next year on our annual update, we'll actually be reporting on what the actual expenditures were based on what you've approved throughout the year and what we've actually committed to and done.
Okay.
Oh, what's next? So what's next? We have 2 weeks of public comment and 2 weeks for you to review this. At that point, any edits that need to be made throughout the week. I know that it's been proofread about a gazillion times by 3 different people, but I'm sure that we will find some editing additions. The County Board of Education also approves our plan. So they did a preliminary run through with me and gave me suggestions for what legally needed to be changed or added to, and then what they recommended to be changed. And I will get more feedback from them over the next 2 weeks as well, now that our plan has gone to them in full draft form. So they may have some edits to recommend. And then we're hoping on the 21st that our governing board approves this plan moving forward. We then submit it to the County Office of Education for another read. And then they submit it to us, submit it to the State Department, to California Department of Education. And then, as this chart shows, then we begin implementing, although I would say we're already implementing, because there's that's what we talk about, that continuous cycle. It isn't an end and a beginning, but we actually begin to implement those things that we aren't already beginning to implement. And then we are constantly evaluating it for its effectiveness, getting stakeholder input. We start that right away in the fall through our school site councils and through our coffee and conversations, and then stakeholder input as we move towards the spring. And then in June, you will have, at this time of the year, we will come to you, as I said, with an annual update that will tell you how we actually did in all of these for the first year, because these are all expecting to do and hoping to do. As we saw last year, sometimes the best laid plans aren't the plans that actually get to happen throughout the year. Thank you. Okay, well, believe it or not, I think I am finished. I am so sorry. that it took so
Beautiful.
long.
Nice job.
Beautiful.
Very nice.
Beautiful.
Well done.
Beautiful.
It's a
Maria,
lot.
I have one more question. For the 2 weeks of public comment, how would the public comment on this? Is it just our next board meeting where that we have another?
We've had a variety of different ways. The next board meeting is typically kind of where they do it. Sometimes they'll come and they'll actually make comments. Typically, they'll call my office. I've had parents in the past call and say, oh, I heard that, or can you tell me more about that? The LCAP will, the draft of the LCAP will be up on the website tomorrow. And there'll be a
With a
place that they
public
can
form.
comment there as well. We don't put it up until it comes to the board first. We want the board to see it before the public sees it.
Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
attentiveness.
So it did almost go to the length of.
I told you, I knew what I would
It
get.
was just two.
It was just 2 of them.
So we now are moving on to business services. We have a public hearing on the 2021-22 budget. And the first read of the 21-22 22 budget. So I think those are two actions together, right?
For the public hearing, if you could open the public hearing.
Yes. Okay, so I'm opening the public hearing. Do we have any comments or cards or people
Public
calling in?
comments, no public comments.
And so now we will be doing the first read. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mrs. Martin. Thank you so much.
I do have copies of the presentation for you. Sometimes I know it's easier. Oh.
Yeah, you did.
Please do it, Dan. But I know it's easier sometimes to take notes or ask any questions. If you're ready, we'll go ahead and start the presentation.
Definitely.
I'm trying to do double take first. You've seen this slide before. I think we had this information when we did the expanded learning opportunities plan. But basically it applies obviously to our budget development here, that our budget reflects our values and our priorities. And I think after hearing what Mrs. Norby talked about in the LCAP, you can see where the sustainable supports that's so important in the research-based strategies, the right funds for the right purpose, and to supplement current effective practices. Those are kind of what guides in some of our decision making. What a difference a year makes. A reminder for those that were on the board a year ago and listened to me talk back then. 1 year ago, we were adopting a budget, if you recall, with a 10% cut to our LCFF funding. That was the proposal. A year later, we're looking at a super cola, mega cola, ketchup cola of 5.07%. So what a swing there. A year ago, we were looking at opening our schools 100% online distance learning. And now we're looking at going back 100%, although we've already done it this year, but with a full school day and being able to reinstate many of the things that we had to suspend. So it's been a crazy year to say the least, but what I think you'll see throughout this presentation is just how you plan and take a minute and pause and really think about it. We're able to do so many things that other districts weren't able to do. And so rather than counting, sometimes we do that privately, but rather than counting, to really think about, well, sometimes I'm not so sure, others have, but to really think about, put some thoughtful strategic plan, not just we have this and what we're going to do, but to really make it as a big overall plan that benefits all of the students and the community as a whole when possible. This is our agenda for this presentation. I've got what's included, meaning what's included in the budget, what's not included. I call it show me the money, so you can see what that is, and then what's next. Our revenue assumptions, you saw those in the information that you received, and so I won't read them all to you, but I want to go over a couple of things on there and highlight. Our funding for 21-22 is based on our 2019-20 ADA. That was part of SB 98. It was a pool harmless that districts would be penalized for the loss of enrollment due to the pandemic. So although our actual enrollment this year has dropped, as it has with most districts in California, what we're going to be funded on is still based on what happened in 2019-20. And for our district, we were actually growing at that time. So we get to keep what was during the growth period to be able to, that's the funding that we'll use for this year and then going into next year. I mentioned, and you've heard the term mega cola, super cola, and now it's being called a catch-up cola. Not ketchup and mustard.
I know, that's
although I
what
saw
she
that,
said.
but catch-up as in getting caught up. Part of the governor's proposal of the higher COLA was to make up for the fact that we didn't get funded for COLA this year. There was COLA was calculated to be 2.31%, but it was unfunded. So we didn't receive that money. So although the statutory COLA is 1.7%, when you add that to what we didn't get, and then an additional 1% to try and cover some of the costs associated with unemployment insurance and retirement, that's how you write it to 5.07%. Our LCFF is estimated to be almost $55 million. So you can see that's an increase of over $3 million from this year going into next year. And this is just incorporating the COLA. There are other proposals that are out there that the governor put forward and that the legislator is now negotiating with the governor. We'll go into those in another slide. So I expect that this dollar amount will only increase as the budget negotiations with the state proceed. And then our impact aid remains the same that we typically have about 4.5 million. We received more than that. However, sometimes the timing, especially with the federal government of when we're going to get that money, it can vary. So going with a conservative number and then adding to it once we get beyond that 4.5 million is helpful for our planning purposes. ESSER 2, you know, all of these acronyms there. The ESSER 1 funding was what the first CARES Act money that came out from the federal government at the beginning of the pandemic. We're now into ESSER 2, so it's the second amount of money, and that is $80 million. You may recall, that's part of our 3-year learning recovery program. That money was set aside to be used to help make it a 3-year program. AB 86 was also part of our 3-year learning recovery program. That's the in-person instruction grant and the extended learning opportunities grant. We have a transfer in of 1.75 million from our special reserve fund for prior year impact date. This has occurred long before I ever got here as practice in the district. What it does, it actually provides a safety net for us. Again, I talked about the timing of the payments from the federal government. But even if the entire program went away, we have at least that much set aside so that it kind of gives us time to plan and not just be depending on what we expect to get that year. So we transfer it in from our special reserve because we also transfer it out each year to set it aside to save for the following each year. And then you'll see a transfer in of the 2.2 million. That is actually savings from this year. That was the additional impact aid money I talked about, additional LCFF money that we'll be getting, and that's really based on our unduplicated pupil count. Although our enrollment declined, the unduplicated pupil count number pretty much maintained. So all of a sudden we have a higher percentage because overall we have less kids, but the number that were the unduplicated pupil was about the same. So it gave us a higher percentage, generated more money for us. And then our special ed revenue was a little bit higher than what we had anticipated. We always budget conservatively on that. We're part of the SELPA, and that's several districts that are in the pool. So we budget pretty conservatively on that side and are able to add to it when we get the additional funding.
Just a quick question. Our percentage of unduplicated, I think, was around 72%. What is it now?
I think it is at 70. I have it on one of my papers.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Just
so it's shaded
shoot
in
it
the
to us.
70s. And again, that's now on a lower number. So the
Right.
percentage, you know, it generates a greater percentage.
Thank you.
The expenditure assumptions for number 1 and number 2, they're pretty typical for what we do every year, but I would like to point out the class sizes. In order to receive the grade span adjustment, is to be class size reduction funding that is part of the LCFF, we have to have class sizes of 24:1 or less for our TK through 3rd grade, which we've had for years. And as a district, prior to the pandemic, you know, I was calling it before like BP, AP, but before the pandemic, so BP, our class sizes for the 4th through 8th grades were in the range of 30 to 33. That was the number that we would use. And again, those were averages, they weren't hard caps. There is not, that I'm aware of, a limit or restriction that, you know, about the class sizes in the upper grades. Because now, after the pandemic, so AP, we now have class sizes that really had to do with, in the beginning, just the social distancing. Less students in there, how many kids could we fit in, you know, a room with a teacher, the capacity. And the students benefit by having lower class sizes as well. But there was that kind of shift this last year, 2020, which was really about let's get the kids to school safely. Let's get the employees to school safely. Let's keep everybody safe. And so while the class size that you see are lower is great, it initially was so that we could get kids back. You know, and if that meant that it would have only been 20 kids that we could have had safely in Space Park, that would have been the class size. But so we took each classroom at the time and evaluated, and each site evaluated their own space to make sure that we had enough of the social distancing requirements that were at the beginning of the school year, or the recommendations, and that we would be in compliance, but not just in compliance. You know, you all are aware of what happened personally with me, with my mother, and losing her to COVID. So it was a very personal thing. It was something that I worried about. I wanted everyone to be safe. I wanted the kids back to school, but I wanted everyone to be safe. You know, I worried about some of the proposals, not because I thought they weren't safe, but I just knew we're talking about children and teachers' lives. So to make sure that we did everything as safely as possible, that was really the driver in reopening the schools this year. On number 2, the classified salaries, just a note about the minimum wage increase going up to $15 an hour in January. That was put into law 4 years ago, and I think there's one more year after this that it would go up to $16 an hour, January of 23. So we built that into the budget. I want to spend just a little bit of time on this slide because there's some relevant information that could change, hopefully in our favor. But if not, we've gone with the most conservative, meaning we're going to build in the expenses that we're being told to build in at this time. I want to say hopefully it can only get better, but you know, I'm gun shy about saying that AP after the pandemic. So I'll be cautious with that statement. Our workers' comp rate had actually decreased a little bit, and that's something a trend that's happened kind of universally. What happened when places closed down was there were a lot less of the routine workers' comp claims. So naturally, less claimed, the rates went down. The concern, or the thing we need to keep an eye on, is all of the legislation about employers' responsibility or liability should an employee get COVID, or you know, it's a workers' comp issue. So our own JPA has recommended that we just monitor that. While it's good news, it's always good news to have a lower rate. Don't count on it always being lower or continuing to be reduced as we move forward. But it did save a little bit of money, $56,000. Unemployment insurance. Now, this one was one that, I mean, in the middle of the night, I was emailing Cabinet going to, you know what this cost is going to be. You know, you look at the number and say 1.23% and 1%, kind of like, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that for years, it was 0.05%. So as a district, typically our unemployment insurance budget was only, well, it would have been $23,000. Not a lot. It's gone up to $579,000. And so this happened universally throughout all districts in California. School districts are part of what's called School Employees Fund, so SEF. And it's similar to a JPA, it's a pooled risk. So it's only school districts and some community colleges, and it's only the employees, it's about 1 million employees that it covers in the state of California. One of the reasons that this increase was so bothersome to me was not just the dollar amount, but I don't know if you recall, back at the beginning of the pandemic, SB 98 said they would continue, the state would continue to pay school districts their money, even though we were closed. A requirement of that, though, was that you had to continue to pay your employees and your vendors if you were under contract with them. So if we all did that, then how come they're saying it's because of the pandemic and the unemployment insurance claims that happened? We were required to pay the employees, so it just didn't make sense to me anyways, and actually to a lot of other people, because school services had mentioned they're now going to be doing some more audits in this area it's something just doesn't seem right. And, that this is a huge cost for this district to absorb. We are able to, but when you're talking then you have a much larger district, I mean, it just is compounded and it's a problem. So there's a proposal that the legislature has that would actually reduce this rate down to 0.5%. Cutting it kind of in half, which is much more tolerable than the 1.23. But even if not, we have 1.23% built into our budget. We're just going to assume that we have to pay that. So anything less is only good news. And only, we would be able to add that back into our budget as something we can spend. The STRS and FUESD, the retirement systems, those have had ongoing increases for several years now. Part of the problem was that they have not had any increases for several years. The rate had remained the same. And so you can see just the change for the STRS and FUESD is 200 and for FUESD and 250,000 for STRS. We just want to keep an eye because this is a rate that's scheduled already to go up again in 22-23. It's scheduled to go to 19.1% for STRS. So we're at 16.92. So to go to 19.1% is a pretty big jump. And then for PERS, it's scheduled to go up to 26.1%. So, quickly doing the math here, if you have a classified employee that's a full-time employee that's in the PERS retirement system, you're paying 33, almost 34% between the workers' comp, unemployment, social security. So, you have $100. Well, you need to budget $134 to actually cover that cost. For teachers, it's not quite as much because they don't pay into social security, but it's still a little over 21%. And those rates just kind of keep creeping up there. This is with our health insurance. As you recall, we successfully settled with our associations back in December for the district to increase its contribution to the insurance cap so that employees didn't have to pay the additional increase because again, those rates were going up. And this is another area that the actuaries expect will go up with COVID. There's been more use of the hospitalization and medical. And so it went up even before COVID. So this is just another area that we can anticipate some increases there. Some exciting news that Mrs. Norby already mentioned, but the reinstating the leave is I know it's a very popular program and has been for years here. So we're able to reinstate it. We're going off of what the CDPH guidelines are regarding busing and social distancing. That was one of the reasons that was actually the reason we couldn't do it. We didn't have a way to get them out there if we couldn't put them on the school bus. And then again, another exciting item is the reinstating the regular transportation, which I think will be a tremendous benefit to so many people. Including those that don't have kids in school, but just get caught. I made that mistake a couple of times. Shouldn't have turned this way. KFC isn't that good. I can go the other way. So I'm trying to make it there. And finally, number 7 is to continue our contribution for our restricted maintenance at 3%. And it's just something just to keep in mind with that is it really isn't enough. We have some really great groundskeepers, maintenance workers, custodians who do an incredible job of maintaining our facilities. But in general, 3% usually isn't enough to cover what the cost would be to keep them in that condition. So we're fortunate that, under the leadership of Mr. Bigler as the director there, and then Mr. Carr, our custodial supervisor, and then the many people that work in those areas, they do a phenomenal job. So this is a lot of money, but for really the schools that we have and geographically how big we are, it's kind of difficult. It could be challenging, but they make it look easy. This is an exciting slide. Hopefully you find it exciting. In going through and listing all of the new positions that are in this proposed budget. Mrs. Norby was very helpful in then attaching to a position what the LCAP goal and action is, or if there was something else, like maybe the migrant education plan, or whatever, plan that we could tie it to. So you'll see here on this list, I won't read every single one of them. Many of them you've already seen in some of our other plans. But you'll be able to then look at that goal and that action and see the reference to these positions that we're including here, spelled out there.
Mrs. Martin, now that you're connecting the dots for us, going back to the request I'd made earlier, I don't think we need that because all we have to do is kind of backtrack from here. So I know you're already jammed. I know you're jammed.
Smiling more on the inside than just probably showing you. But if you do see something that, to tie that there, one of the things is many districts are forced to work together, like it or not. The LCAP now, they better work, the ed services better work with the business office. And I think I've mentioned it before, that was never an issue, or we didn't need the LCAP to tell us to do that. It's been part of our practice anyways. So what you see in the LCAP, you'll see in the budget somewhere. Maybe we need to point it out or show it in a different way. But I can't do my job without her, and I hope she can't do her job.
Like I said, anything with a dollar sign, ask her.
But it really, making sure that we both understand are on the same page, and not just us, our teams, our departments, everyone there, really making sure that, wait, what about this position? What about that? And tying it to a specific goal and action. On this slide, what I wanted to point out is the concept of reserve teachers. So we currently have 8 teaching positions budgeted, and we call them reserve teachers. This coming year, the enrollment is probably the most unknown as any because of the pandemic. We have several families that have chosen or that are choosing to return back to school from maybe the virtual academy, or even coming back to the district from private schools or charter schools or home schools. And so just knowing where they're going to end up being, we have these teachers, teaching positions in reserve, so that we'll be monitoring the enrollment through the summer. I mean, we're doing it now, but to see where are they going to show, and that we can add a teacher to whichever site we need to in the most efficient manner. The plus side of that is if we don't need to use those teachers, if we don't, the enrollment doesn't justify it, then that's additional savings for the district. So this is a little bit over $1 million. It's a little bit over $125,000 a teacher. So we have this budgeted for, and it's the most efficient way to do that. Many districts aren't able to do that. They just budget for what they know they need now, and then they'll add to it later. That's probably not the best or most desirable practice, because we'd rather include it and have it in there. But as my husband tells me, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So, we have it, and if we don't need it, it's something that we'll be able to spend in another area. Again, we talked already about the social worker and behavior technicians. Playground supervisors is another group of, we wouldn't have been able to open our schools without these people. Keeping the smaller cohorts, keeping the kids separated, checking when they come into school, they've been lifesavers. So that's another group that maybe didn't get all of the recognition that they deserve in identifying for our schools what is it that we will need next year. We still need about 17 part-time positions. We've had them, they just weren't actual positions. They were working extra duty or substitute, but we've been paying the cost for them, and it was built into our budget, into our plans. But this is actually now going and reviewing and seeing the needs of the schools and what is it that we need to keep our schools open safely.
Is the position, the bilingual school community support services assistants, you mentioned that also, Mr. Norby, is that the same thing that we're going to talk about later in the meeting, that the reclassified school clerk? That's a separate.
That's a new position.
The school clerks are really the attendance clerks, what we call it.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that was.
So this is a different position.
And then going back to the assumption about class sizes. What about next year? Is that's all going to be dependent on the state budget if we can continue to have those? Because I know we did it for, returning and social distancing, and we're going to have to do it next year because we're not actually AP officially.
Not
We are
officially.
still in the middle of the
We
pandemic.
we have planned our budget around the upper grade class size at 28-1. That's what we have budgeted for, which is lower than what we would typically do. As you know, it was lower than that during the pandemic. We wanted to keep it low as possible, just knowing that we would head into next year with some of these same issues would still be at play. But also simultaneously, from all of our stakeholders, we know that people and our students and our teachers benefit from class sizes being lower. So it really was a combination of all of those things, but we are budgeting at 28-1 in 4th through 8th grade. Where we could have been up to 32 to 34-1 as we might typically be. We've kept that low and are budgeting for that for next year.
And based on our current enrollment that we were using and looking at, we've built in capacity at the schools so that with their staffing allocations of how many teachers, we've built in so that they're not just, 1 or 2 kids. And we have
No, there's
They've
lots
got
of space.
To add 60, 70. Now I know they don't all come in neat little cabins at that grade level, but we've built in capacity there so that we're not just right on that edge and, one more student comes and we need to add a teacher. I think that it's something that we should be very proud of, that we're continuing to maintain. And then as we learned this year, we had some lower class sizes in the TK through third grade, but that was a group that we brought back first. So just in trying to be as safe as possible and what we knew at the time and what the guidelines were at the time was, smaller class size. I look and go, the littles, I call them the littles, they don't need to be as far apart maybe. And so we can have the class sizes at 24 and still have reasonable distancing and make sure that the safe measures are in place. Did I skip over one? So many of these you'll see on this slide were from the migrant agreement that we have with the county and the state, the new positions there. Also in occupational therapists, this is a position we've actually had as a contract. It serves the district better to have this as an employee that we have better control over the scheduling and work assignment. I mentioned already about what a great job our groundskeeper and maintenance staff do. But looking at needing an additional lead groundskeeper and a groundskeeper, primarily this is the base schools. You've been there and seen how beautiful those campuses are. They're huge as well. They're big to maintain. And so this is actually just much more efficient use of, rather than sending the one crew that we have and having them all drive out to San Onofre. And the drive time there, if we have a staff member that's assigned out there, then it saves with that driving time and they can split the one school and 2 days a week at one school and 3 days a week at the other and vice versa. And the cafeteria assistants, we talked about what a great job they've done. And Ms. Hazley, our director of child nutrition, deserves so much recognition, appreciation for all that she's done. And just how much her staff appreciates her. I was at their end of year kind of party that they had. And I think it was the first time that I've ever seen, and she was truly surprised that her staff on their own had gone and got her this gift and had her sit there and just this beautiful message about what a great leader. And she was in tears, I was in tears, but to see how much they were tasked with doing things that nobody else had, these are positions that typically are 2 or 3 hour positions that work during the school year that, while the kids are maybe in school, they get to stay there and help out. These people worked 8 hours a day plus every day. They typically didn't work over the summer in the past. They worked in the summer, they're working on, and they're happy about it. And they're saying they love their boss. So that says a lot about her leadership. And everybody has done an awesome job, but she's reviewed and looked at the staffing and the areas, and being able to pivot as we to make changes to the food service program. And so there's additional staffing needs there as well. This is just the highlights, I guess, of some significant changes to the budget that some of them have already been called out and we've talked about, but others maybe weren't. And so I just wanted, these are really, to me, they're really good talking points and things to be proud of. That we're going back to our regular schedule, the transportation we talked about, the rules we talked about, the 3-year learning recovery program, new language academy program at Fallbrook STEM. I know a couple of meetings ago, I think we had a presentation on that. And so we're adding that program to Fallbrook STEM Academy as well, so that it'll be at our in-town sites. The ELA textbook adoption that Ms. Norby mentioned. We're adding an after-school program at Mary Bay Pendleton. We have heard this for a number of years, but not to the level of detail that we heard this year, that the base support with their CBC, their after-school childcare, it's just not sufficient. It doesn't have the capacity. They can't support enough kids. It's a very popular program there, but there's very limited spaces. And so for us to be able to partner with the Boys and Girls Club, and just like we have the ACES programs at our other sites, but to have that out at Mary Bay, we think will be a great benefit to the families that were out there. And it's something that they talked about with the loss of transportation, was that many of them are not in occupations where they can just be able to leave early or to make those kind of adjustments to their schedule. So that this would be very helpful for them as well. And then included also is additional PE support. We have the district PE program that also, while it provides instructional physical education instruction, it provides release time for our teachers to be able to, or planning time, I should say, so that when their classes are with these teachers and assistants, then they have more planning time. So we've increased that so that it's the PE teachers and the PE assistants won't be stretched so thinly there. We're to the section about what's not in the budget. So as you hear, and it changes all the time, and probably what I'm going to tell you now may have changed since we've been sitting here because it's happening very quickly. Somebody made the comment, without being political, that, wow, we should have a governor's recall election every year because we've had more money thrown at us this year than we ever have. So maybe that's not such a bad thing, but it's happening quickly. And so, which is good, we get this information a lot more timely. There were times in the past, long time ago, where the state budget wouldn't be adopted for a long time. We would be operating without an adopted state budget for months into the year. So they now have to do it by June 30th, but they're even doing it sooner than that. On the left side, you'll see the governor's May revise and his proposals that were put out at that time. And on the right side, you'll see what the legislature has agreed to. So the governor gives his proposal and lists it there. And then the legislature either accepts, rejects, or comes up with their own proposal. And so what I've listed there is kind of where they're similar, kind of where they said, and things that they've agreed to. The governor proposed that this supplemental concentration grant funding, that the concentration grant portion of it be increased. And if that was to go through, it would be $1.1 million additional for our district. The legislature said, no, they rejected that plan. They wanted it to go to the supplemental part of the calculation, which benefits more districts. That, though, still would be over $1 million for our district. So one way or the other, they can duke it out, negotiate, arm wrestle, whatever. Somebody give us $1 million in whatever format it comes in. The governor had proposed a targeted intervention grant and an in-person instruction health and safety grant. The legislature rejected those and didn't give anything else, they didn't have a counter offer, I should say. But when it came to the deferral pay down, the expanded learning grant, which is in addition to the expanding learning opportunities grant we have, this is new. And then another plan.
I know, I just said another plan.
The CNS kitchen upgrades and training, they have agreed, not with each other, but they have agreed on their own that they want to move forward. So the budget negotiations are continuing. The legislature, though, they actually agreed on June 2nd, which keeps them from having to go to budget committees. And so they're able to now, it's the negotiation time with the governor. And again, that's why I said, sometimes this recall stuff and things happen behind the scene, go for it, but give us our money and come to a conclusion sooner rather than later. One thing I just wanted to mention, that part of the budget negotiations that is a hot topic is the idea of the independent study, virtual learning that people are debating, I should say. We had the entire virtual academy already set up and running the whole year. It was a quite successful program. My son was in that program and did wonderful. For districts that didn't have something set up, who were just doing maybe their hybrid setup, or okay, now everyone stay at home, it could be problematic for them to try and do this next year, because we have to operate under current law on the old independent study homeschool language, the law that's in place. And it's a little bit different, but because we already have ours in place, we've addressed many of those things already. And so for us, it won't be a change, it won't be difficult. But this is something that, although it's in the budget negotiations, there's just, everybody agrees that the laws need to be updated. It's just how and where they should be updated, that they're kind of butting heads. So to be continued. Also not the budget, and this is federal money, is ESSER 3. So we had the ESSER 1, which was the CARES Act money, the first round that we got, the ESSER 2, which we are including in the 3-year learning recovery plan, and now ESSER 3. And this was the one that was just signed into law on March 11th under the Biden administration. It's $9.4 million for our district. It's estimated to be that. It's huge. All of this is great, all one-time money. We'll take it and we'll make it last as long as we can doing the things that we need to do. But this is, we haven't included this in our budget yet. It's still being flushed out, I should say, because it's from the Department of Education and then it goes to all the states. And so there's going to be requirements, this is always written into law, and then somebody has to decide, now how do we implement that? So when the law says that there shall be a plan and district, okay, who's going to do that? How are we doing that? And that's what the California Department of Ed is currently doing right now. They're supposed to have out the template by the end of this week. Yes.
Another plan.
They're supposed to have it out by the end of this week. We'll see. It wasn't there when I checked yesterday. But this money, again, very similar to the other money that we have received. We have to adopt the safe return to in-person instruction plan, which I wanted to put a GoPro on the kid's head and go, look, we are safe return. What's the plan? We're doing it. We have to reserve a minimum of 20% to address learning loss, and that wouldn't be an issue for us. That's been our focus with much of the funds. And we have until September 2024 to spend this money. This could be, maybe it's a 4th year of the learning recovery program. Maybe it's something that we maximize our funds and we're able to mitigate some of the ADA loss because that whole harmless is going away. So until we get all of the regulations and the rules and how we can spend it and what we have to do, it's not included in our budget. The county office recommends not including it in our budget until we know more. So we're not including it, but this will just be in addition to everything else there. So that's some really good news. Our general fund unrestricted revenues, you can see there they total a little over $54 million. The LCFF sources is a little difference between what I said of almost 55 and this, and without getting too technical, it has to do with special ed money that is not on our LCFF calculation, but is part of that source. If you go to the next page, and I don't want to hurry anyone along, but I want to get to the bigger concept here. On our expenditures, you can see it's $55 million, more than our revenue. And if you go to the next page, you can see that we would have a deficit, what would be considered a deficit of a little over 1.5 million. We historically adopt our budget, pre-pandemic, before pandemic, with about an $800,000 planned deficit. And what that is exactly the reasons that we laid out. The state's budget hasn't been adopted. These other things are out there we know are coming. We know that we're going to be able, and even if no money came in, just through the people that are going to retire, the regular people that we have, we may not need. We have $800,000 in our budget that we could, if necessary, if nothing else came, we could make some adjustments for. What it enables us to do is it keeps us from having to prematurely cut. So I don't know if you're aware of other districts that a lot of people get a March 15th notice, like everybody who possibly could. And then those people, and you lose some really good people, go out and go to other districts, and we say, welcome, come to Melbourne. We have a different philosophy and a different practice. And that is that we will adopt our budget with a planned deficit. And that deficit will be made up usually by the time the state adopts its budget. But I no later than first interim when I report to you as of October, that deficit is gone. So you hear a lot about deficit spending. And this is another one like the unemployment insurance that really makes me twinge. If a district is doing things as advised, then they should be deficit spending, because what that means is you're saving your money from one year to be spent on a future year. Not all your money, but some of the money that you get too late in the year, the in-person instruction grant money, the expanded learning opportunity grant. We didn't get to find out that was even approved until March. So we're going to carry that money over and use it into next year. When the county and the state and the newspaper and anybody else who wants to be critical looks at deficit spending, all they're comparing is current year revenue and current year expenditure. They're not considering that we said, hold on, we want to save this money and we want to make it a 3-year plan and make it last. So we'll get the comment. I'm going to tell you this now. We're going to get the comment that comes on the letter from the county that says your budget is approved. However, your deficit spending. That is their requirement for their AB 1200, their oversight. And I understand that. But because a planned deficit at this district is a savings account, it's not a bad thing because we plan for it. Deficit spending is bad when you don't know why. You just kind of put your numbers in and go, oh, shoot, we don't have enough money. That's a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a big problem, you know. But if you know why, or, you know, I look at it even on a personal level. I know how much that I'm going to make and I know what I need to spend. And I know it's something that I have to save for. I'm going to set it aside. And when I make that purchase, though, I would be deficit spending because I would be spending more than I made. And so it's not a bad thing, but you'll see, and I've seen the newspaper articles that, you know, 43 out of 44 districts in San Diego are deficit spending. Well, you know what they should be. And the one that's not, there's something wrong with it. There's something not right there. Our reserves with this budget would be about 4.5% in just the general fund alone, but we also have in our special reserve the 1.75 million. So we're about 6.6% as our reserve. Something that is coming, possibly, you may have heard about, is the cap on district reserves. This has been something that's been in law for a long time. It's just never had to be the trigger, they call it. It's never happened. When the states deposit into their rainy day fund for education is greater than 3% of what they give school districts for budgets, all of a sudden a cap is imposed on what school districts can have in their reserves. So the interesting thing about this is, you know, nobody knew what the recovery was going to be after the pandemic. And while we're seeing significant one-time resources and the recovery's happening quicker and all of these great things, there's still that blind corner. There's still this thing called inflation that's going on that, you know, it's great news, but there's still this kind of, So to limit a district's reserves Although ours aren't at that level, but they would be when you consider that we're all, because they also include what we would set aside for our 3-year running recovery. So this, what I'm showing here is not assigned to anything. But under this law, it would limit it to 10%. I tell you what, the pandemic, 10% wasn't enough, and thankfully we had other reserves and we started saving for that so that we could open our schools. So this is something that it's just never been activated, and it's scheduled to be, should things continue to go the way they are, meaning the revenues are better than expected, that it would limit our reserve level to 10% in starting in the 2022-23 school year. I anticipate that there'll be some changes to this law, because it sounded good at a time when it wasn't needed, and then now it comes up and everyone's going, who made that dumb law? And I don't know who did, but there it is. And in concept, I get it. If everyone's doing well, then we don't need to be building huge reserves. We should be spending the money on the kids that are there, absolutely. But then you look at the reality of what's happened recently, and to limit a district's reserves to 10%, that just wouldn't be enough. So I told you that deficit spending is something that just one of those phrases that just gets under my skin. Question, is deficit spending bad? Answer, for us, no, it's not. I gave a definition of what it really means, and it's just simply expenses exceed revenues. But again, it's our savings account, it's our plan, it's what we use for future use. It avoids the premature budget cuts. And then the budget adoption timeline that the state has. So we have to adopt earlier than the state does. And so we're going to say, just in case, who knows what happens at the state level, we want to be as conservative as possible, but that means it's one to look like it's spending. I will say this proudly and loudly, and to anybody who wants to listen, even if they don't want to listen, deficit spending is what allowed us to open our schools this year. It is the reason why we were open when 80% of the other districts were not, because we started planning so early and setting that money aside and using it for the next year is one of the most significant reasons. Without the money, we wouldn't be able to hire the staff, buy the things, smaller class sizes, things like that. So it's not a bad thing. So I ask you to remember this slide when you get the letter from the county that says your deficit spending, or when there's an article in the newspaper that someone picks up. They don't care to ask the other side, or why are you deficit spending? I can give you a list of reasons and exactly what we're doing. Others, maybe they can't. I don't know. I can't speak for other districts, but it's not a bad thing in this district. It's what's enabled us to be careful planners and actually keep us financially strong.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm sorry if I missed it. In the what's included and what's not included, where is the mega cola? Where does that land?
Cola is in the LCFF, where it's the revenue assumptions. And it said the dollar amount that we're going to get for LCFF will increase by $3 million. It's been.
So that's
built in.
included.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. It's included. That's something that both the governor and the legislature and the Department of Finance and the legislature Allen's office all agree to. As a matter of fact, the legislature thinks there's going to be more money. So I mean, send it. We've got ways we can use it here. But yes, that is the one item that is already built into the budget. What's not built into the budget, though, is what the COLA will be for special ed or some of our other categorical programs, just because those are still subject to negotiation.
Are there any assumptions as far as existing staff and raises as part of that COLA?
Not yet, but that'll come. Absolutely.
And that's something that we've talked about. Our employees have worked their tails off, and there's nothing wrong with, in my personal opinion, they do deserve part of this money that we're getting. They're part of the reason, they're the reason that we're able to open and bring our kids back. So there's nothing wrong with that. As a practice, we don't, and most districts don't build in, like we're going to build in this as a budget adoption. There's too many unknowns in the very beginning. And two, to make it a true negotiation, we don't want to come with, that we want let's, interest-based bargaining, the way that it's more of a collaborative, I should say, like, what are you working with? So usually districts don't build that in. What we would be looking at though is some of this additional funding that's not included in the budget, or some of the other areas that we talked about, that the unemployment insurance is not as much, or things like that. That could be possible ways to pay for salary increases, or larger contributions to health insurance, or things like that.
At the May revise, they specifically talked about, obviously anytime there's a COLA, that's one option, but so much of this, and I think the story we talked about it at our last meeting too, that we have to do new things with the money too. It can't just go to raises for everyone.
That's
As much as that would be nice.
That's correct, exactly. And so, we'll make sure that our money is spent in compliance with how it needs to be spent and how it's required to be spent. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with making our employees a good, I think it's something we should be proud of. I truly do. I don't think it's something we should be ashamed of. I told y'all, I didn't realize how competitive I was until I'm sitting there, and I guess it's easy to be competitive when you're winning, that I didn't realize that until I hear these other districts and what's happening there. And it's not that it's all bad, but we're just a lot further along than others are, and they're facing issues that we might have faced 6 months ago, or a year ago even. So we're much better off. The next steps for our budget, there were several coming soon pages in your binder that you see, and they are coming soon. One of the challenges this year was with so many different plans and with so many different sources of money, and making sure that everything, what she said, what I had, and that it all lined up with human resources and the number of positions they have. I just wanted to make double, triple check that stuff, and not just have anyone feel like they sent it off. And so you'll be getting that information this week, as early as we can get it to you in paper copies, so that you can, have it there and see it there, and give you time to review it as well. I am working on incorporating, Mrs. Lever had an excellent suggestion last year, I don't know if you remember, about the budget assumptions, and having them kind of in a chart, but with the history. So we could see what was COLA for the last 4 years. What was, class sizes, or what were the rates for STRS, or, whatever, so that we could see it in a nice kind of chart format there that would provide the history instead of going back, because I did the same thing. I don't know what was COLA then, or what was the rate. So putting it that, so I am working on that. So that'll be part of it coming soon. But you'll be getting that. The budget adoption will be bringing the entire budget in the state format, which that doesn't tell you anything other than it's a lot of paper, but it won't give you the detail of some of the things that we've got over here. But technically, that's what needs to be adopted, and we'll be bringing that to you on the 21st, our next board meeting. We will be revising our budget as soon as the state adopts its budget. So once the state adopts its budget, we will make the updates to our budget and bring it back to you. I anticipate it would be the first meeting in August, maybe at the end of July, if we can get it all and get it in time. But I anticipate that it would be in August, so it would be a revision, and you can see where we incorporate any additional money or any changes that they have if the rates are reduced. And then monitoring our student enrollment is going to be key. It's something we do every year, but it's just going to be so much more critical this year. It does affect funding in future years. But again, where do we need to add staff or make changes on things? We really want the schools to be as prepared as possible to be able to open up. We wait to see the whites of their eyes. We hear that all the time. But just, we can anticipate though too, by looking at the enrollment and the who's registered, and what's going on, where we can, there's a big growth there, there's a big change here. So we'll be monitoring that even more so than usual over the summertime. And we encourage parents and families to, get their kids registered where they think they're going to go, so that we can have it set up for them as best we possibly can.
One comment on that. We were talking, Mrs. Lundin suggested that we do a little bit of outreach, maybe marketing, maybe by ads. is it budgeted? Do we have funding that we can set aside to do maybe a mailer or both, or Fallbrook News to say we're fully opened, all our programs are back, we have a music program, our Duluth is open again. You know, I think getting the word out is really invaluable for not only our existing parents who have probably heard, but for those parents who might have left us. Do we have a budget to do that?
We do. And, you know, as you mentioned, I mean, shoot, getting one kid back would pay for the cost.
That's
of
true.
The whole thing here, but yeah, we do have money set aside. Mr. Trench, sorry, your budget being tapped, but no, it's part of the communications budget and just general outreach. Definitely, I think you're absolutely right. There's so much good and so much to be proud of. And just that we need to get it out there, make sure people know and understand.
We see the schedule and the marketing plan and maybe even some rough drafts of the work that will be used in either the flyers that will be mailed out or the pieces that will be advertised in the village news at our next board meeting.
I'm not gonna say yes, because I don't want to commit to something that.
Probably not our next board meeting, but by our meeting in July, we could. You know, one of the things I would reassure you also is in the meantime is how much communication is actually going out on a regular basis now. With between our social media platforms, the ways we communicate to parents. We've done outreach as an example to all of the students who have left to go to private and charter. We've been making personal phone calls to every one of them. So yes, that kind of, it's a consistent, the beauty of having a director of communications is that we do this on the regular. What you're describing as far as an outreach to say, let's remind our community about the kinds of things that are happening in our schools this next year is absolutely something that we will be doing. I don't anticipate that we can have something like this ready by the 21st, but definitely we could have something prepared for you by our meeting in July. And we would be doing that throughout the summer. You bet. Absolutely.
And it's funny you mentioned that because I had jotted myself a note to ask you because I could see a headline that says enroll your K-3 student at FUESD and then just highlight some of the amazing just bullet points.
Yes.
Really, I think very compelling story and have a couple of photos in there. It would get people's attention. It would start a dialogue. And as you say, really, you get 50 kids. And wow, bonus, or 20 kids.
Absolutely. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the weekly, there's been a weekly article in the.
Oh,
Fallbrook
absolutely.
Village
I
News
look
on
for
our
it the
district.
first time I
That's
get
right.
my-
And that's because of the direct work that we are doing directly with a reporter for the paper. Mr. Trench and I have mapped out the topics over the next number of months that are going to be covered there. And one of them is why FUESD. And so it's literally exactly what you're talking about. So that is among the things that we're going to be working with them to have an article about that exactly as you're describing.
Yeah, because I think that, you know, that now is probably when people do need to enroll their kids and everybody procrastinates. And if
Yes.
they've never had a child here, that might, you know, say, wow, I didn't know about that.
I
school."
agree, the sooner the better. You know.
But we're very-
Since we now
Curriculum
know.
might frown on me standing on the corner of. Signs saying come to exam.
Let them frown. I'll be standing with you.
There you go. You're right, people are making decisions right now.
Yeah.
And so I think sooner than later is better. So.
Just one really small little thing. Thank you so much for getting us all of these paper copies. If it's possible, 3-hole punched would be wonderful because I'm going to start putting them all in binders. And I have a 3-hole punch at home, right? And I'm going to be hole punching what I have. You keep sending me more and I love it. But
We will make sure that they're free hole punch. I'm only laughing because I'm a binder person.
yeah.
Sometimes finding that shoot, and I have one at home that's really good and one that's not. And if I get the one that's not, I'm dangerous. So anyways, we'll make sure.
And if someone else uses your binder or puncher and they move it, then they don't line up the next time.
You know what I'm talking about. Little things. And our last slide here, just the final thoughts. That although the budget negotiations are continuing at the state, and we'll probably hear things over the next couple of weeks. regardless of who wins, the governor, the legislature, whatever happens, it's really, this budget is a win for public education. You know, so like I said, supplemental concentrate, however, call it and package it. Public education is a priority and it's reflected in this budget. And then we're proud of this budget and I hope that you're proud of it too. You know, we're proud of this budget. It, you know, maximizing our revenues, that's my phrase. I think Ms. Norby's adopted that now. I've been around here for too much or something there, but if we can use that to address the effects of the pandemic, then it's a win for our students and families as well. So we continue to maintain strong financial stability, but there's a lot of good in this budget. There's a lot of one-time money, but we'll make it more than one time. We'll make it last as long as we can in the most effective way. And there's just a lot of good things and a lot to be proud of in this budget. That's all I
Thank you.
have. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know.
Great job.
Thank you.
Both of you. Thank you. Great job.
Okay, so now we are moving on to action item resolution 25, 2021 for the architect. And this is the third amendment to the amended and restated agreement. Architectural services for Mary Fay. So do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
Make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any conversation? Okay, so Mrs. Lundin.
Aye.
Mr. Favela.
Aye.
Mrs. Libas.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. And action item number 4 is resolution 26, 2021. This is again the fourth amendment to the amended and restated agreement for architectural services related to Mary Fay Pendleton. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second? Any
Second.
conversation?
I love seeing these things that are paid for by grants. It's
Yeah.
amazing,
Yeah.
amazing feeling.
Okay, so I'll take a vote. Mr. Favela,
Aye.
Mrs. Libas.
Aye.
Mrs. Lundin.
Aye.
And I too vote aye. We're moving on to human resources. This is information only. There's a first read for the new job descriptions for 4 positions or 4 new categories with multiple positions. Any discussion? Okay, we're moving on to educational services. Last board meeting, we received the Title I, Part A, District Level Parent and Family Engagement Policy. And this is now the time that hopefully everyone's read it and had any questions had been asked. So we have a motion to pass this family and parent engagement policy. Do we have a motion
I'll make the motion.
and a second?
I'll second.
And any discussion? So we'll take a vote. So Mrs. Lundin.
Aye.
Mr. Favela.
Aye.
Mrs. Libas.
Aye.
And I too vote aye. We have a second educational service action item for California State Preschool Program. Do I have a motion
Make a motion.
and a second?
Second.
Okay, and any conversation or discussion, questions? So we'll take a vote. Mrs. Libas.
Aye.
Mr. Favela.
Aye.
Mrs. Lundin.
Aye.
Great. I also vote aye. And now we have the consent agenda. I asked to have number 6 and number 7 removed off the consent agenda. And so now these are action items. I would like to make a motion that we move these legal contracts to our July meeting. I understand they expire June 30th, so these law firms will need to send a letter requesting a 30-day extension to their existing contracts. And at the July meeting, I would like the information that we received in our Friday update to be added to the meeting agenda with some information on how these lawyers, these 5 legal counsel serve us, And at that time, we can also add the request for the new HR gentleman's request for his legal counsel. We can make that discussion at that meeting. So I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a first?
I make that motion.
Okay, in a second.
I'll second.
Okay, so we'll take a vote on moving this to July. Mrs. Lundin?
Can I make a comment?
Oh, I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
sorry, yes.
Is there some reason that any reason we can't do it at our next meeting since these contracts end at the end of the month? If we brought it back we have another meeting in June.
We have a lot going on right now that I want to have cleared up before we make this meeting. Any more questions or discussions? Okay, so we will take a vote. Mrs. Lundin? Aye. Mr. Favela?
Aye.
Mrs. Libas?
No.
And I too vote aye, so it's 3-1, it passes. Now we will move to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to pass the consent agenda?
I so move.
And is there a second?
Second.
Do we have any conversation? Okay, so this is a vote to pass the consent agenda. Mrs. Lundin?
Aye.
Mr. Favela?
Aye.
Mrs. Libas?
Aye.
And I too vote aye. And I would now like to move to adjournment. But before we do, we have future agenda items for consideration. And I request that we put on a future agenda item that we discuss Governor Newsom's office announcement for opening up our board meetings to the public, and that we have a discussion over that item at the June 21st meeting.
Perfect. Happy to do that.
Okay, great. And
Can I ask one more? Can I add one more thing while we're here before, I don't want to interrupt. Is there anyone else in the future? I don't want to interrupt. Okay, no, I did a quick fast scan of a Robert's Rules of Order about your ability to abstain while we were presenting. And I want to be able to make that correction now because I was incorrect. That if you would like the minutes to reflect that you wanted to abstain from that vote, I would like to provide that opportunity to make sure that we're doing it accurately.
Yes, please. that'd be
You
great.
bet. I would say, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that that I was able to provide you with the corrected information because I was incorrect.
I just have one other comment. If we were in a public meeting, which we are not, but we have people in the audience viewing us, it would seem to me that it would be in everyone's best interest, especially those in the audience, that all cameras were left on all the time. So I do respectfully make that request. And this is the third time I've made that request. So I just want to point that out. Okay, if there's no other comments, I will be adjourning the meeting at exactly 8:41.